Take your seats, take the best view, feel comfortable. We are about to start the second session of today. And before that, can I ask you, how was the networking? Any new persons you met? No? You just kept silence. That's good. At least coffee. I hope that you try coffee and cookies. Now, by the way, did you notice that there was a digital expo on the walls? There were stories from our own FinTech companies. So during next breaks, if you wonder what to do and how to do, just check videos from our FinTech companies. Now, this session will be dedicated to a topic many participants are deeply interested: capital availability for FinTechs and startups. Last year, global FinTech investments reached record level. More than 5,500 deals worth more than $210 billion US. To tell us more about external funding raised during different stages of Nordigen life cycle, key takeaways and lessons learned, please welcome Māra, Pērkuma-Masļakova, PR manager of Nordigen. Māra, please.
Hi everyone, how are you feeling? Woo! Awesome. I'm so excited to be here, and I look forward to telling you about funding for startups and Nordigen's experience during the funding stages. What is Nordigen? It's one of the most well-known companies in the startup system in Baltics. But for those of you who don't know, it is an open banking data platform where banks put financial information on their APIs, and FinTechs and developers can access that information through our platform. Nordigen was established in 2016 by two ambitious founders, Renāts and Lokomets. They grew the company from 2 to 100 employees in less than 6 years and have worked towards a mission of democratizing open banking data for FinTechs. These are the funding stages that most startups go through during their funding rounds. There's the pre-seed, seed, and late-stage funding, such as Series A, B, and C. During these different stages of funding, startups have requirements to meet the investors' requests of the investors, and to perform their startup requirements that are put for them. Not every startup goes through the same stage at the same amount of time. Even though the EU average is 18 months, it can take longer or less time. The pre-seed stage is when FinTechs start raising, or startups start raising their initial capital, and that's the earliest round for them to raise capital to develop their idea and to focus on figuring out what's their market share for going forward. They focus on the minimal viable product or finding it, and investors are looking for a strong team and the potential of the startup to succeed in the FinTech environment or whichever industry they're playing in. The investors at this stage are friends, family, and the angels and accelerators that are in the market. In the Baltic market, there are several investment companies. However, in Latvia, the most well-known are Change Ventures, Overkill Ventures, and Bad Ideas Fund, which our founder Robert is part of as well. The founding amounts at this stage can be from a couple of thousand to $1 million, and this varies a lot between different startups. Nordigen's experience with the pre-seed was a really good one because Nordigen has a supportive Baltic environment, especially the Latvian startup community. Nordigen started playing with their initial idea at Tech Hub, and that was a really good opportunity for them to discover their business model, to learn from other interesting startups in the community what they're doing, and to improve their growth in the long term. Baltic Accelerator Startup Wise Guys was another good opportunity for them to grow their startup. And as a result of these, they were part of TechChill and won the 2016 pitch battle. They also got into 500 startups, although they didn't take their business into the US, which is a good thing because we're still here in Latvia. So yeah, Nordigen nearly raised 1 million in their first round from Change Ventures, Seed Camp, and Adventure. And from this pre-seed round, they had the resources to grow further. They had ambitious founders, they had a strong team, and the capital. Huge focus on the strong team, because as we heard from other speakers today, it is really important that you have the right people and hire the right talent to take your startup forward. The next stage of funding, and sometimes referred to as the first stage, is the seed stage. This is when you have the official equity for launching a product and finding the market fit, building traction and revenue for your product. The super angels and VCs are the ones investing during this round, and the funding amounts range from 1 to 10 million. Nordigen's experience during its seed round was a really interesting one. As I mentioned before, Nordigen was founded only in 2016, and they raised their first seed round in 2021, which was 6 years later. But it was actually a blessing in disguise. The market was only ready for Nordigen in 2019 when the PSD2 directive was implemented across the EU. The directive allowed API connections to be built with EU banks, and Nordigen was able to fetch financial data from these banks in Europe. Through this, Nordigen built one of the biggest networks of connections to banks' APIs in Europe, more than 2,300 connections. Nordigen impressed the startup world again in 2020, December, when it launched the first free open banking platform in Europe. This attracted a lot of attention from investors, and Nordigen closed its seed round with 2.1 million in July of 2021. Some of the investors that invested in Nordigen were Black Pearls, Inventure, High Goal Capital, Cultures Holding, and other angel investors from the Baltic community. Nordigen's experience shows that there is no one shoe fits all to raising funds, because even though they took 5 years to get there, they have made a great business. Late seed is the last stage of investment I'm looking at today. These seeds, the late stage Series A, B, and C are separate stages and have different funding amounts. However, these are the most advanced series of funding that unfortunately most startups don't make it to. These are the unicorns. An example from the Baltics being Printful. And the expectations at this stage are growth funding, creating value from existing business. So a startup has to have a valid model and be able to scale it internationally. The investors at this stage are experienced VCs and private equity investors, and they're looking at investing anywhere from 3 million to 100 million and above. Nordigen never fully experienced the late seed stages of funding. Although the founders started raising Series A capital, after meeting several investors for many months, and mind you, the experience of raising capital is a very difficult process for founders. It takes a lot of hours, a lot of sleepless nights. However, the strategic decision was made to join forces with another FinTech. In July of 2022, this year, Nordigen was acquired by GoCardless, a UK unicorn. You may ask, what is an exit strategy? Why should you have one? An exit strategy is a plan for transitioning ownership to another company. Although most startups dream of becoming unicorns, it's really rare that a company goes through IPO and becomes public, and most companies grow through acquisitions. This is a really valuable lesson because when you start a startup and you look for funding, you should have an exit plan and an exit strategy to know what you want to achieve in the time you have going through the different funding rounds. Nordigen's story is a VC's fairy tale. Nordigen started their business, raised capital in several rounds, and exited, successfully being acquired as a startup by one of the biggest companies in the world. I have some key takeaways that I would like to finish with of Nordigen's experience going through different funding stages. In the pre-seed stage, Nordigen focused on having a great team and building the value, establishing the direction where their business is going through, and actually knowing what their minimum viable product will be, not yet building it. So if that's where you're at with your startup, or you're going through these stages, these are the expectations that are there from investors at this stage. For the seed stage, you should demonstrate your market fit. Nordigen was able to do that thanks to the PSD2 directive and open banking APIs. And for your startup, you would have to find the same. Where is your startup going? What is the story there? What are you providing value to society? And such questions you should be asking yourself. For the late seed stage, you should start scaling your startup, making revenue internationally, or you should plan an exit strategy. There is no successful there's no one single way to plan your startup's growth. There's no one shoe fits all. And this is the story of Nordigen. We are going to be building a future together with GoCardless, and we are really excited for this journey together as Nordigen exits the startup world, Latvia. And we can't wait to see where it's going to be going. I hope you learned something about Nordigen or the startup journey today, and I hope that these key takeaways give you some insights of the experience of growing and raising a startup in the Baltic community and the different resources that are available to you as you grow your business here. Thank you.
That is kind of an interesting story, isn't it? As Māra Pērkuma-Masļakova said, story of VC fairy tale, Nordigen. Now it's the time for the second panel on crowdfunding and capital availability for FinTechs and Startups. So many good and interesting topics await you. Fundraising opportunities. What are the options to attract funds in Latvia? What are risks and opportunities to balance for venture capitalists? Crowdfunding practices, where does IPO stand, and top investment areas in FinTech industry now. Please remember about Slido to submit your questions. The ones which were related to regulators practice, Marine will take up and answer during the next session, so we will not forget about them. To lead this panel, I invite the person who wanted to become an astronaut in childhood, but today is CEO of Mogo, Renti, and Primero Finance. Please welcome Krišjānis Znotiņš.
Hi everybody, it's It's really a pleasure to be here and meet you. And yet I'm not an astronaut, but still I'm really trying to help FinTechs to reach the moon. And I believe by working together, all of us could do that. But the good thing is that actually in this discussion we have some more important guys coming up, and the first one of them is Renāts Lokomets, who is co-founder and strategic partner of Venture Faculty. And come here, join us. Yes, please. And the fact which you should know about the Renāts, that he is having also a twin brother. So actually we don't know who is here today, but hopefully it's the Renāts who will help us in this discussion. Then please, Karsten, come join us. Karsten is Secretary General of the German Crowdfunding Association and also a member at Cambridge Center of Alternative Finance. So good that we are having also some overseas experience, and maybe look from abroad how we are looking and doing here in Latvia and how the things are being done in the Europe. And what the Karsten is doing, so he's really keen on reducing his avio travel time miles, so reducing the CO2 footprint, which nowadays is a topic, right? Then the third cool guy coming up on the stage is Matīss, Ansviesulis, co-founder and CEO of Creamfinance and Esketit. Matīss, please join us. And if you think what's interesting about the Matīss, then he is actually a long-standing fan of the hip-hop, and his company Creamfinance also had connections with the Wu-Tang Clan. So you need to find it yourself. And he allows also different kind of extreme sports and other. So looks like some superpowers are there. And the fourth one, Jānis, Blaževičs, please join us, CEO and founder of CrowdedHero. And Jānis really thinks that calm seas do not create great sailors. So Jānis likes to capsize the catamarans. Also a nice thing. So yes, here we are, and we will start the discussion. What to do with the funding, how to get it, where we are today, and it's coming up. Okay. And listening the previous discussions and presentations and trying to put down some figures, actually what I noted that there is around 100 active FinTech companies in Latvia, 400 startups, so sounds like there is some community already. I checked actually the speed of new companies registration, and in August this has been the highest starting from the year to date. So still there are a lot of companies who are trying to start being active in Latvia, and trying to remember what came across my mind about the, let's say, loudest or some not regular financing attractions in Latvia. Then I at least remember that there is 2 IPOs lately done, which is a good thing and which is not so often happening in the Baltics. There are actually, during the last year, there have been several bond issuances done by not institutional companies, which again is quite a good trend here. And there recently also was the first securitization project, which is something completely new for Latvian financing environment, I would say. But that's a short intro, and the time is moving on. So let's start with the Renāts. What you can tell? How is it? Is it easy to get the capital in Latvia?
I think Latvia in recent years, last 2 years, we see opportunity to attract the money from different sources where the money is there. So we see what a lot of venture capitals, angels, retails, all of them have money. So, and being part of different processes from this year, so we see what if the startup is strong And if a startup has the idea, the team, and understand how to reach the market, opportunity to take the money is not very easy, but the probability is very high. We understand what now the new instrument came to the market. Was part of the issue IPO in Latvia, Nasdaq. Indexer did the IPO. The process was very interesting. The process is regulated, but the possibility is here. And Indexer is also FinTech, FinTech in asset management, but it's still FinTech. For us, we see what the retail and the angels are trying to combine their power together and to make the investment. We see what now more and more syndicates of angels are coming to the market and ready to make an investment. We see what venture capital, not only local venture capital, but also international venture capital coming to Baltics. And they're looking for the new opportunities and new good startups. And as all of us are here and we understand that FinTech, it's one of the most interesting industries what Latvia has. I very believe what if you have a good idea, if you have a team, and you can attract money, it's possibilities here.
Okay, thank you. It sounds good that the interest actually is increasing and capital is available here in Latvia. And before hearing, is it really changing the situation because of all the external factors? There is one quote from the President of European Digital Finance Association, who just recently said that there is ongoing introduction of industrial policies, inflation, the end of cheap money, and the new European regulation will paradoxically help financial technology companies. This will be hard, it will be a period of blood, sweat, and tears. But in short, the FinTechs will benefit from that. So maybe we can pass over to Matīss. You also as a FinTech, what do you think, how you will be able to benefit from all that?
From all these macroeconomic...
From the changing environment where we are currently in. And
I personally never look at this. I don't care. I don't read the news about the macroeconomy, about what's happening in the European Union. Couldn't care less. It doesn't matter for my business, and it doesn't really matter, I think, for the fundraising. If we're talking about specifically fundraising, I think what matters is generally the kind of knowledge and experience that people have in the market. So I'm thinking about what Renāts mentioned, and my experience when I started Creamfinance, which was about 10 years ago, literally our understanding of fundraising was to call my brother and a couple of my buddies that I studied in university to ask for £1,000 loan, and then let's see what happens. I had no exit strategy. I barely knew what a VC really means. And then fast forward 10, 15 years later, people are so knowledgeable. There's so much information on YouTube even, or wherever you go to a networking event. So I think, so that knowledge is there. And of course it also comes with the fact that there's a ton of funds, a ton of European initiatives that are now far more available. There are all the founders that have successfully exited companies that are more willing and knowledgeable about how to make seed investments, and they're not asking for, dividends in the second month and things like that. So I think it's just a number of factors that have made the environment, just more developed compared to what it was 10 years ago. And I don't think about it in terms of these European-wide, policies and things like that. It's just not my expertise. But I think we're in a far better place in terms of knowledge and experience and the funding available today than 10, 15 years ago. Can't compare.
Thank you. And Karsten, maybe we can move on to you. So from your perspective, how do you see it?
So first of all, thanks so much for the invitation here. It's really great to be here, and thanks also for the kind introduction. You mentioned I was trying to come by boat to Riga, which was my original plan, but then there was a decision whether to arrive just on time for this panel or come a little bit earlier and take the plane, so I had to do this. But anyway, I wanted to say, from the outside, the Latvian FinTech ecosystem looks very, very mature, very, very advanced. In fact, I think when we were looking at the peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding platforms in Latvia, also I think must have been now 12 years or so since the first platforms come up. I don't know, probably even earlier. I don't know when Mintos was founded. When was Mintos founded? 2000?
7 years ago, yes.
Ah, okay. So anyway, so the Latvian platforms popped up on our radar and screen very often, and I get a lot of questions also from FinTechs in Germany about, what is so special about these platforms that they grow so fast and have this international outlook. And one of the things which I found is that, for instance, in Germany or in France, the first strategies for the platforms, for the alternative finance platforms, are always to concentrate on their home market and try to grow within that. And of course, the German market is big enough to sustain a number of platforms. What I found over the years is that when going to the offices of FinTechs or talking with people from FinTechs in Latvia, the home market seems to be left pretty quickly. There's like from the start, there's a strategy to grow internationally, and right now we are in a very good situation, to be honest, because our data at the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance shows that every time that there's a major economic crisis, the FinTechs get a boost in terms of new customers, new partnerships. I mean, sometimes we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic that first some, for instance, digital lending platforms, it was quite difficult for them for the first 2 months. But then there was a surge in activity. So what I think is now happening with the current crisis right now is that we will see a big boost for the FinTech sector in general. And we did a study. We looked at all the countries globally. We looked at the data of alternative finance volumes and which factors are really important for the growth of an ecosystem. And one of the factors is, of course, the overall GDP and so on. But a very important part is how easy it is for people in various organizations within the FinTech organization to talk to each other. So in some countries, it's very difficult for a FinTech to call up the regulator and say, we have a very specific problem, we need to find a solution here. We have a technical solution, but we don't have a regulatory solution. But it seems that in those countries where the FinTechs have the feeling they can directly call the regulator and have an open discussion with them about that, these ecosystems are growing much quicker. And my impression as an outsider is that this is the case here in Latvia, that it's very easy to approach people both on the policy side and on the regulatory side, and also form these connections. So that's what I think is going to give a boost to the Latvian FinTech space.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think this leads very well to Jānis. Jānis, how was it actually to communicate with our regulator and to set up, because as you know, Jānis recently acquired the crowdfunding license, so it was some things were done before that, right? And yeah, so what's your experience in that?
Yeah, hello everyone. So our journey basically started a couple of years ago when there was no crowdfunding regulation in place at that time. So we went to the Spanish regulator, and because they were in place the crowdfunding regulation, we started over from there. But we found out during the 2 months that the regulator was still responsive, with very good follow-up with the sandbox, the same we have in Latvia. But the main issue was, like Karsten was saying, so the language problems. So we were not able to really briefly communicate with them. So we started to look for some other places closer to Latvia, basically. Then we went to Estonia, to Lithuania, but at that time already we heard some news about the crowdfunding regulation that will be in place, and we started to prepare some materials, some legislation acts, procedures, so on. And then the communication with our regulator, Latvian, started. So basically, we were surprised since the first Zoom call that they were super friendly. So it was like another fintech in Latvia, but just from the public sector, from the regulatory. We started since day one, so easy going, go through the acts, so start prepare some documentation, one by one, another Zoom, so they were very responsive. And I'm not saying because of the forum and it's organized by them, but they are, especially the fintech department, so they are easy going. So you can call them, we have some issues, so we don't know how to read this or that act from the materials, from the regulation, and they are easy. So 1-2 days, so you are online, so you can discuss. So, and there we are, like they said in the previous discussions, so 3 months is, it happened in 3 months is, and okay, there was some information need to be prepared, but still. So on the 16th of May, we submitted all the documents for license, and on the 16th of August, we had it. So that's true.
Sounds very inspirational, actually. I think it's, some of us should think of acquiring a crowdfunding license or some other one, because it went very smooth. And I think big thanks for the FCMC colleagues, right, for this cooperation. And most probably also this is one of the very rare situations when our small market actually is a benefit, because most probably in the bigger markets the processes are bigger, right, and in the smaller markets we are able to move fast. So this is one of the Latvian advantages which we need to use. But trying maybe to jump quite away from local and Latvian market, there was just one very interesting example recently in international environment. Klarna, I think, a very well-known company, right? The latest valuation of the company is 7 billion, which is exactly 85% drop comparing to the period year ago. Renāts, you're looking that, yeah, that's what happened. Maybe you can comment why and what to learn from such cases, not to have them in Latvia.
So as we say that crisis is here, like crisis is coming, like winter is coming, so for sure some winter will come. If winter is coming, the strong player will be stronger, and the weak players will be weaker. So in situation with Klarna, so they had the model what didn't work amazing, so the valuation decreased. So, but that's a challenge for new technology to come, and as was mentioned, so the crisis is bringing new technology and new era of fintech to the market. We see what the new companies and new fintech trying to adjust themselves to the market and to bring a new solution for small and medium businesses. We see the integration of crypto blockchain together with payment solutions. And for sure, this kind of solution will pop up very soon. And the valuation will be based on the reality, if the company could be profitable soon or not. In the situation of the last 3-4 years, then the valuation were big. So now we are coming to lower valuation, but money was coming to real companies. So, but money is still there, and a lot of money.
Okay, thanks. Matīss, maybe something from your experience.
I was thinking about dying children. I was telling a story to my friend about information. There were 6 million dying children, and I asked him, "What do you think about it?" And he said, "I think about those dying children as much as they think about me." So going back to Klarna, I think about Klarna's drop in valuation as much as they think about me. It doesn't really change much, to my company or to my approach to funding. You still have to focus on the operations. You have to have a good team. The market can go up or down. You have to adjust your, valuation expectations, and that's about it. I think that's how I approach it.
Okay. maybe we can take a look on what questions we have on the Slido, if we have anything there, and we could try to answer some of them. Anybody could help by showing them on the big screen, please? You're not seeing, but there on the small screen, a lot of things are currently happening. And
we have to read it, or you're going to ask them?
Sorry?
Are you going to ask them, or do we have to read them?
Yeah, no. It's, I think we can select the first one, which is having the most thumbs up, and which is about what's the biggest bottleneck when it comes to the credit funding access ecosystem in Latvia. So politics, or is it legislation, or is it banking, or is it other stakeholders?
I can try to answer, because we see what Latvian regulator is doing a lot of very good job, and we hope that more and more licenses will be received soon by the local international players. But competitors, like regulatory competitors as well, we see how Lithuania, Estonia, UK, they are trying to attract also Latvian company to be established in there. And we always need to remember, if we want Latvian company to be based in Latvia, in all levels, we need to be very open to give opportunity to these companies to work not only in Latvia but globally, because as was mentioned, so Latvian market is very small. We can pilot something here, but real money we can make only worldwide. So and here, so that it's not only, we don't need to speak about bottleneck, but we need to talk also to speak about the competence what is here in Europe.
Okay. Some other maybe views on the same question.
I think I can just repeat the same thing. It's from my experience in the companies that I am in competition with, they have never thought about funding in terms of being limited to Latvia. It just doesn't make any sense. Latvia is a great market to start off your product and see if it works out and so on. But in terms of access to funding and scaling, you just have to think from day one about going into other markets. Right? We're not from Germany, we cannot think in terms of domestic markets. So in essence, it's just, you have to have a mindset that your funding is going to come from, Europe or everywhere else in the world, but Latvia. You shouldn't kind of like focus on searching for funding here. Maybe in the beginning, yes, you can do your first steps and call your friends, but other than that, yeah, it's really like a European market.
To actually continue a little bit more on the same question, it's also on some of the articles, it said that Latvia has gone through unprecedented reforms in the financial sector, setting different quality bar for AML. And as here is mentioned also the banking in this, where the banking stands in, so how do you think, are we more strong now? It has helped, or it has thrown away some investors?
I think the Latvian banking, it's already past. So it's already legacy, so we just need to forget about it. We know that a lot of Latvian bankers, they converted to be FinTech entrepreneurs, and we see what they are very successful worldwide. And from point of view of investors, the investors are not thinking about what happened in the past, so they are looking what will happen in the future. So they are looking for the project, checking the project itself and their potential.
Okay, so basically it has helped us and even made us stronger, converting from, let's say, more traditional services to the more FinTech and startup phase. Touching still maybe the same legislation and the market environment, maybe Karsten from your side, what are the main trends, how the market is being developed, and what are the initiatives from the regulator, also keeping in mind that lately some new EU regulations have been introduced, some are still coming, regulating different kind of markets.
Yeah. I will answer your question in 1 second. I just wanted to mention two things. So one of the things we see is in those countries where the digital lending and crowdfunding platforms and alternative finance platforms are working quite well, we also see in the data a drive to improve access to SME finance in general. For instance, there was just a study done on the American market, and it's very good for academics because they have the different states and the economic growth in the different US states. And what is really interesting that for instance, peer-to-peer lending, marketplace lending facilitates easier access to finance for SMEs indirectly, not just through the platform services, but also because it drives competition in classical lending. And so especially in areas which are not in the metropolis or in the large cities, but which are more rural, that's where the access to finance is very important, especially with the new crisis coming up. So that's what I wanted to say, is that there's an indirect impact of fintechs which they have on the larger economic area. And one of the things we also see in data is when we look at investors, there is sort of two classes of investors. Most platforms say they have a very locally based investor base where people prefer to invest in local businesses, partially because of the language, but also partially because of the affinity for certain legal systems, etc. And this is, however, there's a second class, which I think is also in the retail investor space more and more, that people are very much looking to diversify their portfolio across the European Union. And we have several regulations which are coming up or which are in place, like the European Crowdfunding Regulation, MiCA, etc., which will make it much more easier to do this across the European space. And I think that's very exciting because that investor class is growing a lot. We see this in the data, but we also see it from the platforms that more and more investors are actively looking on platforms outside their own country. In fact, I think our regulator, the BaFin, German BaFin, was very much surprised when we told them how many German investors can be found on the Baltic platforms. You know, when you look at the data, and they were like, what's going on? Why are they using these platforms? And I said, yeah, because they're really easy to access. You can build a portfolio, you can manage your investments really quickly, and so that's why they chose these platforms. But and this is, I think, the second question. Oh, sorry, there was the first question now, which is, I can't answer this question because I don't know how quick the commercial law will change, but it's interesting to note that even though you have a European frameworks now for most digital and alternative financing, for crowdfunding, for cryptocurrencies is coming up, for digital lending, for consumer lending, there will be a new European framework which is currently being developed. There are still some bottlenecks in the local regulation, which are sometimes not really clear in the first place when regulators talk about this. So I don't know if anyone of my colleagues can discuss about the first question there about the maintaining a register of companies, but this is actually something which, when we talk about crowdfunding, we have really these problems that the terms for setting up a limited liability company and taking it public are so different across each member state that this is something which the European Union will have to find more ways to harmonize as well. And that's actually, I think, a big bottleneck of funding, that, you know, it's even the Baltic states, there are difference between Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia in setting up limited liability companies and taking them public. And so I think that would be something which needs to be streamlined soon.
Okay, thank you. I will stop you here, but and bring back this good thing what you said, actually, that you were, or the government, are a bit surprised how many German investors are investing in the platforms in Baltics, and bring over to the Jānis. So what do you see where the investors in your platform are coming, or where you are looking them forward to come for the years to come and for the project to come?
Equity crowdfunding is a little bit different. We already discussed with Karsten yesterday, but we were surprised actually, because the biggest part of the investors still coming from Latvia right now, what we see. So then the most registrations, because like Karsten said, they understand the local market, they understand the companies, pretty much there is some, they want to help them, they want to build local economy, so, and there is still huge demand from the locals who wants to use their fund. There is a little bit lack of education in Latvia. I think that's the problem. So they don't know how to invest, how to buy this equity. So that was the biggest challenge. And then coming back to the question number one, this is a problem because you need to have like a huge investments. For example, to do crowdfunding properly in Latvia, you need to establish joint stock company. You cannot do it as the limited liability company. The discussions was already started some time ago with the regulator, with the Ministry of Justice, with the Ministry of Economics. So that is a problem. So you need to have some exemptions from the law to ease up this kind of funding to the companies who wants to develop. And I think that's the question. So as soon as you have like the platform is one thing, because on the platform there are just few clicks and you have the equity, but the biggest part is behind the scenes. So you need to set up these pretty much complicated structures. So in the end of the day, through our platform, the investors can get B-class, dematerialized, name shares. So it's already sounds super complicated. And yeah, so there is still some jobs that needs to be done.
Okay, that's good to hear, because otherwise, after your first comment with the cooperation with FCMC, it sounded that everything is done and nothing more to improve, and so there are some questions what we can improve in our environment. That's good, so we will be even better than now. And continuing with you, actually, how ready are the companies to get the financing from the same crowdfunding? Because it also requires some things, some preparation. And how do you see? Is our companies ready for that?
The companies are ready, as I said at the beginning, so there's plenty of companies who wants to raise funds in that way, because this kind of mini IPO, they can get public, so they can promote their product, but there's a lack of these legal barriers, so we need to have at least some kind of lead investors or angel investors, so at least to put these first 35,000 to establish a joint stock company. There is some, I would like to say there is some legal barriers. The companies are ready because they are the lack of funding. They are looking for the funding, but they don't have this spare, I don't know, 30, 50, or 100,000 to invest at the beginning at that stage, and then the ball comes back to the, I don't know, 3F investors. So you need to come back and look for some angel investors to support you.
Okay. And actually, continuing on this, there is also some government initiatives which are available and which will be available in the upcoming periods. So there has been, for the last years, there has been accelerator funds, which we also heard in the Nordigen that it helped them. And now those accelerators will be closed, as I understand, and will not anymore be a help, but there are some other initiatives. For example, there are government-initiated venture capital funding will be available in the market, so 93 million euros from the government, plus 10 additions from capital from the venture capital funds, and this initiative actually is based towards the pre-seed and seed stages. So is this something what is needed, and how big leverage we can get out of that? Because putting in some money in the economy, we do expect, of course, that it will bring quite a big difference and help in the market. So any takes on this, the new period? Yeah, Matíss.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, for sure, any funding that comes into the country and into the market is good news. I think so. That's absolutely applaudable, and it's good and it's going to help. But what I think is missing is the successful founders that have exited or just made money, whichever way, in Latvia or in companies that have been founded here and maybe operate internationally. That these founders put the money back into the startup ecosystem and take the lead into providing more funding, and so that the ecosystem can flourish, rather than waiting for some kind of European bureaucratic programs to make that happen. And I think we do miss that, and I think we're quite far behind in this regard comparing to Lithuania and Estonia, unfortunately. And for sure, people like us are to be blamed for this, because it should be us that run the companies and start them and make money. That we should put money back into kind of like startup tickets, etc. So I do feel like that in Latvia is missing. Maybe lately in the last couple of years, 2 years or 3 years, that's changing. But I personally don't feel like we have this like super cool vibe of like rock star kind of entrepreneurs putting money into like really moonshot type of businesses. I don't feel it. Maybe I don't know, I'm not in the environment or something, or I don't follow the information, but that I would want to feel a bit more of.
Of course, but to do that, most probably we need to have more of those success stories, and we have those people who are ready to invest and who is then putting back the money in the economy, which of course then is creating this spinning forward and helps everybody. You mentioned, yes, that in maybe in our neighboring countries you have heard more of those cases when the money after successful companies are coming back to the economy, and also we actually see that from regulator perspective, maybe the neighboring countries, let it be the Estonia and Lithuania, they have tried to focus on some specific niches which they support, which they try to encourage, and they have received results. For example, Lithuania, as I have noticed and could read through, that they have focused on the payment institutions, and they comparing to the other countries, are allowing the payment institutions be directly connected with the central bank, so they don't need the commercial banks in between them. So Estonia has been open for crypto and blockchain companies and promoting this kind of business. So
can I just add, like in Lithuania also the specialized, I think it's called specialized banking license, sort of sandbox regime that makes the regulator there very open to opening a bank and getting a bank license, which is the reason why Revolut went there. Is also a very good example where they're kind of ahead in terms of regulation.
So the question would be, is there something we could learn from that and benefit all of us, that should also we as a regulator of the country try to focus on some specific niches, or we should try to be open to whatever fintech companies, in which case we would be more attractive?
My opinion, as I said it a couple of times already, so my opinion, what we need to bring our companies and entrepreneurs back to Latvia. We need to give them opportunity to be registered in Latvia and to work globally. And from point of view of us as being presenting here from FKTK, government, etc., we need to find focus and to understand what our focus is FinTech. And FinTech, we have potential in FinTech, and let's try to move it forward as maximum speed and as soon as possible. Because the success of Lithuania was that they decided on the governmental level, we want to bring FinTech, international FinTech to Lithuania. And they did it. They have now 200 payment institutions. They have, I don't know how many hundreds of crypto licenses. They have a soft banking license. And to compare to Latvia 5 years ago, we were very advanced in comparison to Lithuania, and we're still very advanced. And we have a huge potential to have a base for Latvian entrepreneurs and Latvian FinTech to be located in Latvia. I think we can do it, and we slowly doing it, and we see a great result and great big, large wheel from the FKTK side, and hope it can be done soon.
Thank you. So as I hear, the direction is there, but maybe Karsten, from your point of view, so what else you see we could do?
So I've worked with a lot of regulators in Europe, but also in other continents, and this question about the niches, like always the second or third question that comes up after people ask, like, how do you define FinTech exactly, and so on. That's the first question. And then, but then when policymakers move on and ask, like, where should we focus our resources on, it comes up. So, but I don't want to, say what Latvia should focus on. I think what happens is that in those countries that you mentioned, Estonia, Lithuania, also other countries which focused on specific sectors, there was a couple of firms, fintech firms, which were really successful, and they sort of built the ecosystem with them, and then because of that, the regulators helped to streamline the processes around that kind of ecosystem. And so the question is, what a government, what a regulator can do for a specific niche. I personally think it's much better to focus on streamlining the processes of getting the licensing, dealing with problems, updating the license, etc., the whole supervision. That needs to be as digital as possible to allow the fintechs to move fast with their business models. And we see already that when you look at how quick the fintech business models are changing, especially in the investment space, in the lending space, it's moving away from the classical, let's say, the retail-oriented focus. It's moving away to allow a broad range of services, but then still, even with the European frameworks, you need several licenses to allow all of these services to operate. And this is where it's important for the regulators to make sure that the fintechs can apply those licenses very, very quickly. For instance, move information which they have already submitted on their company and use it to obtain other licenses. And then I also think, when you told me that you have applied for the crowdfunding license, for the European license, I noticed there were some other platforms which only applied but did not receive the license, from Spain, from the UK, France, and they made a huge press statement and said they had applied for the license but have not received it yet. So what I would encourage, I think Latvian fintechs need to be, in this case, be really outspoken and make sure that, to say how quick certain regulatory standards were able to be achieved here. Because that's, I think, sometimes where other fintechs, they make a big brouhaha about things they have not achieved yet, and the Latvian fintechs, they have achieved it already, but don't speak about it too loudly yet. So that's something I would achieve.
Thank you. So yeah, that we all can do. I think we should speak louder about our achievements, and we heard also the Nordigen, but just had a nice achievement. So final remarks, gentlemen. We are unfortunately running out of time. We would have some other questions to be discussed, of course, but then Matīss, maybe some remarks from your side. So what do you think, what would give the most benefit for our ecosystem in general?
Well, I mean, just a bit on the previous question, I was thinking about that. My 2 cents are that, these regulators and the government wants to often position themselves as we're going to try to be number one or the best or the most welcome, most open, regulator for whatever fintechs or other companies, and that's kind of our goal. And I think in the notes somewhere I also read that FinTech wants to also be now kind of number one, and I think it's kind of a bit, how to say, it's a bit too aggressive to think that we can be now like a super advanced place for regulation and to welcome all sorts of companies, unless we first do the kind of homework, basic things first, which would be making the licensing process, whether it's for fintechs or for regulated funds or I don't know, other things, just more simple, not to mess with the brains of the entrepreneurs, not to make the AML requirements too complex, to allow more simplified registration forms, to do very simple things, Just get those things right, and that's going to allow kind of a massive dynamic and a very positive feedback from companies, and that feedback will spread through word of mouth and other ways. And I don't think we need to, as an ecosystem, set a target that now we're going to have to be like number one in Europe for welcoming fintechs. I think it's kind of a bullshit, notion. It sounds very nice and it maybe attracts attention, but if we just do, simple things and allow companies to register here, get licenses fast, that is as good as it can get. That's all we need. That's
okay, so it's about the processes, efficiency, and about being fast, as actually mentioned by several of you before that. But also I think we discussed that we have this potential to be very fast, as we are not the biggest market and we are much closer maybe the industry to the regulator and everybody together. And so Jānis, your closing remark, your 5 points put in the Commonwealth.
Coming back to the question you asked at the beginning, So I think you need to focus on something. So you cannot be good on everything. It's like on an ice cream shop. You are going to choose the right one. You know, you're not going to do, I don't know, to really to buy specific ice cream. You are going to buy the one. And then if you develop your strength, that can be very good value added, because it will, like in Lithuania, that the specific payment institutions, they are building around these institutions the whole ecosystem, and they are bringing, if you are good at something, then definitely the industry and the business will come, and they will develop everything around. So even this is, I don't know, crowdfunding, or I don't know, processing or something, so you need to be good on something. We are a small country, so you cannot be good on everything. So I think some focus can be very good and productive.
Thank you all. And I think today we discussed that actually the discussion and cooperation between the regulator and the industry is much better than it was, and there are very, very good examples how we are moving on. There is actually also several government incentives where the additional money will be in the market. There is company incentives. We see that actually trend of newly established companies is increasing, even despite all the circumstances and geopolitical situation. And there is also some like higher level that it's in each and every changes in economy that there will be some new winners and new niches, especially for such as fast-moving companies as FinTech. So I think the best what we could have is next year, when we hopefully are having the same forum here, that there is several options to choose from to be here on the stage to speak. Today we had the Nordigen, and that the organizers next year cannot decide which one of 10 or 15 to choose from, and those will be, of course, the guys who will bring back the money in economy, and we will grow all together. So thank you very much for your view and discussions, and hopefully it was interesting for everybody also in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Can we give a round of applause to the participants of the panel? And actually, if you look at the article of, I think, last week's The Economist, the ones who are true beneficiaries of COVID out of technologies, they listed digital payments, cloud computing, and cybersecurity. So if you think or plan to move into new areas, these might be the ones who are still booming, not only in Latvia, elsewhere in Europe, and also around the world. So, do you know that our brain consumes about 20% of human daily energy? So now it's time to give a bit of rest to our brain and try culinary creations. So you have now exclusive opportunity to walk, enjoy fresh air, and then to enjoy lunch. The lunch will be served at Radisson Blu Latvia Hotel. The ones who are first time here in Riga, you go outside, you turn left, and 250 steps farther on, there is the huge hotel building. You will not miss the entrance, and then on the left, your lunch will be served. We hope to see you back, or we have to see you back at, let's say, 5 minutes past 2 o'clock for the third panel and discussion on regulations, MiCA, crypto, and all other interesting stuff. So see you back at 2:05, and enjoy your lunch. Our colleagues will show you the way.